This first story was originally created by a user named Capable Elephant 6355. The title is 2 tampons mean my marriage is over. I, 29 female, have been with my husband, 30, for 7 years and married for 4. I have never had reason to suspect he was unfaithful to me or even remotely dissatisfied with our marriage. He jokes that we're still living the honeymoon phase, nearly 5 years and 2 kids in. I wouldn't have questioned that or him were it not for a surprise I found in his car last month. When buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something slotted between the cushions. I pulled it out and saw that it was a tampon. This wouldn't have been so unusual had I not had an IUD that has stopped my period for the past year. I didn't even recognize the wrapper style. I brought it to my husband's attention and he didn't seem to understand what it was, let alone why I was holding it. That was until I told him where I'd found it and why I was certain it wasn't mine. He shrugged and said it probably belonged to his coworker Fiona. It's not uncommon for my husband to carpool to lunch with his coworkers, and we're both fairly close to Fiona and her husband. I figured it was entirely possible the tampon had slipped out of her purse whenever he had driven with them or offered her a ride. No big deal. I put it out of my mind until we had dinner with Fiona and her husband a few weeks later. I had sincerely wanted to believe my husband. I couldn't get over the way it had been tucked in the seat and how my husband had seemed not to have any regard for it whatsoever. Maybe playing dumb. I don't know. I did something that I now feel kind of crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons while we were out together. She handed me one almost identical to the tampon I'd found in our back seat, and I breathed a sigh of relief. So the tampon there was probably the same here, and in all likelihood, there was an innocent explanation as to why it had been left in the backseat in the first place. I thought I'd seen the last of the out-of-place feminine hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning, this time in my sock drawer. I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair, and even more nauseated at the thought that the woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was my husband's coworker, why would she give herself away by offering me one the other night? In any other situation, I would want to talk to my husband about this, but I feel too sick and embarrassed to approach him with what I found. What should I do? One user asked OP if Fiona had ever gone to their home and actually had the time to plant the tampon. OP said, she's been to our house many times and vice versa. To my knowledge, she wasn't over any time in the past week. So if she planted that second tampon, she had to have found a window of time when I wasn't home. Anytime she and her husband visit, we all stay downstairs, and you'd have to go really out of your way to make it to our bedroom, around our dogs, over the safety gate, past the other bedrooms. Not saying it's impossible, but definitely tricky to do on a quick bathroom break, I would guess. Another user proposed the idea that perhaps OP's children had taken it and had been playing around with it. OP said they're 2 and 4 years old. Both have a mischievous streak, so I didn't want to rule out the possibility of one of them moving stuff around. But I can't imagine how they'd get their hands on 1, possibly 2 random tampons that I never bought. A little over 2 weeks later, OP provided an update post. Contemplating every possible source of 2 tampons has been my personal hell for the past few weeks, but I wanted to share an update. Shortly after posting here, I told my sister what had happened. The tampon in the backseat and the sock drawer, my husband's cluelessness, the tampon from Fiona, and everything I suspected but didn't want to believe. We compared tampons, save for the backseat one I'd already discarded, and they were a match. I hadn't left either in a place where my husband or daughters would have found them and moved them around. My daughters didn't know what they were or where they had come from. My sister was convinced it was Fiona, and that she was either my husband, with me, or both. Direct confrontation with either party still seemed like a bad idea, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue. Unfortunately, they already had plans. My sister and I agreed it was too soon for cameras without any other evidence, so it was just a waiting game. I watched my husband for any changed behavior. Nothing. I also kept careful tabs on our house for any misplaced or foreign items, and even the girls for any new friends they might have met. Also, nothing. My sister's husband was adamant on this last point, and partly why he was inclined to believe that the tampons were harmless. He said if anything had been happening in or around our home, it would be nearly impossible to keep it from me and the girls, since my husband was the one taking them to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. I felt a good bit of consolation in that. It wasn't until my younger daughter, the 2-year-old, came down with something last week that I felt any differently. I wanted to be the one home taking care of her, but my husband insisted I I stay at work while he stayed home with her. I was okay with that. My sister and her husband figured it was a good sign that he would take the time off at a moment's notice. At that point, we were all already beginning to put the tampon fiasco behind us. By the third or fourth day, I was just happy to see a near healthy child and a husband who was helping see her through it. Toward the end of that week, though, I came home to something strange. The toddler I'd left that morning in an old PJ set was now dressed in a onesie I'd never seen before with a tiny clip in her hair. I can't say I have the sharpest memory, but I have a pretty good sense of what my kids wear daily, particularly what kinds of clothes they wear. I'd sworn off the full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front, long before we'd ever had our second. The long snaps are just a pain in the ass and a no-go for efficient diaper changes. It's just not something I would dress her in, and my husband knows as much. He doesn't plan for or buy the girl's clothes and doesn't accessorize them, so I was bewildered and floored at the thought of someone around our sick child without my knowledge. I didn't think twice and went straight to my husband to ask if anyone had been over to see him or the girls. He seemed confused, like before, and asked me why I would think that. It had just been him and the kids all day. I asked him again if someone had so much as stopped by to say hello, and he denied it. He told me to calm down. I might have lashed out and come forward with the accusations right then and there, but our older daughter was in the room, and she sensed something was up. In a calmer voice, I asked him a third time if anyone had been around our children, and my husband swore that the girls hadn't been around anyone but him. He also denied buying new clothes or doing anyone's hair. With our daughter in the room and my emotions everywhere, I decided to leave it. I couldn't make sense of it then, and it hardly seems clearer now after I've driven myself half crazy with explanations that aren't adding up. In the comments of this update post, OP added some additional bits of information. My 2-year-old can only string together a couple of words at a time, and when I ask her about her time with daddy or her clothes, she answers based on the cues I give her. For example, I ask, "Who gave you that pretty bow?" and she repeats "pretty bow" back to me or "mama and daddy" over and over. My older daughter, almost 4, was at daycare that morning and she can't recall anything different from that day. I don't remember the PJ change or the hair clip, so I guess she was changed sometime that morning, but I'm not sure. I have a 45-minute commute to work, so stopping by for lunch isn't feasible. My sister has been kind enough to leave work and drive past a few times here and there, and she hasn't seen anything out of the ordinary. We have a Ring camera at the front door, and I've got the app on my phone with alerts on. There's nothing there yet. If anyone has recommendations for more discreet surveillance, I'd be open to it. I'm just the least tech-savvy person and worry another camera will be easy to detect. And yes, we get our carbon monoxide detectors tested regularly. One user asked OP if it's possible that the hair clips came from daycare, to which OP said, "I could see the hair clip being a possibility, but less likely on the onesie. My younger daughter hadn't been to daycare in days, and if either of them had returned with something like that before, I would have noticed, especially since it was the kind of onesie I hate with a passion." Another 2 weeks later, OP provided us with the final update in this series of posts. After nearly losing my mind over a hair clip and a onesie, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with the accusations and half-baked guesswork. I'd gotten so absorbed in the paranoia and misery of my situation that I wasn't sleeping, eating, or caring for my kids the way I should have been, and I wasn't getting any answers. So I decided to pull the trigger on the hidden cameras and have them shipped to my sister's house. My brother-in-law agreed to help with the setup over at mine. Before the cameras were delivered though, I got my long-awaited confirmation last week. A Ring notification alerted me to movement at the front door while I was at work. Half expecting to see a delivery person, pet, or lawn care salesman for the 15th time, you can imagine my surprise when I saw a clip of a young woman leading my daughter into the house hand in hand, with my husband and other daughter close behind them. The girls were supposed to be in daycare and my husband at work. As far as I knew, the woman lived 2 states away and a court order kept her there. I immediately called my husband to ask him what the this woman was doing in our house. He didn't answer, so I texted it to him. Even in his stupidity, he probably realized he had messed up by going through the front door. He knew I had gotten the Ring alert and wanted to delay the inevitable. He did pick up by the 5th or 6th subsequent call. The woman on the camera was my husband's sister. As I would find out later, she was the likely source of both tampons, the onesie, and the bow. She is also a registered offender and a recovering addict who spent the better part of her adolescence and young adulthood coercing the silence of another one of my husband's family members after she had them. I hadn't seen or heard from her in years. And from how my husband talked about her, I didn't expect I ever would. But here she was in our house with our children. Suffice to say, I was livid. It wasn't an affair at all, and still, somehow, infinitely more disgusting knowing who it was and why all of this had been happening. Apparently, my sister-in-law, fresh off another stint in rehab, had wanted to reconnect and make amends with people she'd hurt, and my husband was high on that list. My husband didn't want me to know, or worse, try to keep our children away from her, so they'd been meeting in secret, mostly at our house when I was at work. They would enter through the garage in my husband's car, so the Ring camera at the front door wouldn't go off. She spent the night on a weekend I'd been on a business trip and slept in our bed. She babysat our girls on a night my husband told me he had dropped them off at his parents'. She bought the girls' clothes and dressed my youngest in the onesie and bow my husband claimed to have never seen. My husband swore this was all in my head. The tampons, the onesie, the bow, and all the rest. He was perfectly content to watch me agonize for weeks over a woman he insisted didn't exist, shrugging off each progressively more unsettling discovery like it was news to him and telling me I was being irrational. He insinuated that I was experiencing postpartum depression, 2 years after I'd given birth. A while back, I'd told him that one of my biggest fears for motherhood was to suffer PPD like my mother had with me, to not be fully present for our babies and to be left with a world of guilt and regret as they grew older. He told me I wasn't sleeping enough, that I missed the girls too much, and that I needed to take a step back and reevaluate the state of my mental health. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was my husband and no other version of events made sense. Now, after a month of this mindfuck, I have nothing to show for my trust but this pathetic situation, and a lot of anger. That was the final post we got from OP in regard to this situation. The original titles of these posts insinuated that OP was going to get a divorce, but I'm guessing that was because she suspected that her husband was cheating on her. Now that she realizes this is not the case, I'm curious about what she will do. Personally, I think divorce is very reasonable even with this outcome. The husband is placing his 2 young children in the hands of a offender and former addict. I don't think I could trust my partner again if such a situation came about. Seriously, the husband is so screwed up in the head. I understand that this is his sister, but she literally did a minor and tried to keep him or her silent so that she wouldn't get in trouble. What's even crazier is that the husband tried to gaslight OP into thinking that this was all in her head. Continuing the relationship could likely mean that he would lie again. And what good is a marriage if you know your partner lies? This next story was created in the relationship advice subreddit by user throwaway 1955 787. The post is titled, I, 50 female, introduced a girl to my son, 25, while he was in a situationship. I never understood why my son's girlfriend was always so cold to me. For context, they are both 25-year-olds. A week ago, my daughter told me it was cause I introduced a girl to my son while he was in a relationship with the girl. So 3 years ago, before he officially started dating his current girlfriend, he was in a situationship, which apparently meant they were interested in each other but weren't together. It was like that for a few months, and he was always getting luxury gifts for her, inviting her to our house. When I would ask him whether they were together, he said that she was still considering it since there were a lot of guys interested in her and she was talking to some of them. She's a very attractive online influencer. Around the 7th month that I knew about this situationship, I met a really nice girl who was working for me. She was very interested in my son, so I gave my son her number and told him that she's interested in him and I think she's nice. He just nodded and got together with his current girlfriend about 3 to 4 months later, so I wanted to talk to her while she was at our house today to apologize if I came off the wrong way. She said that I should have minded my business since it wasn't my relationship, and I mentioned that I thought it was a situation where they weren't committed. She said that every situationship's boundaries were different. My daughter disagreed with her and said I should post it on Reddit. Is there any way I can salvage the relationship? She didn't seem to appreciate our conversation and is getting even colder. My son, however, seems to be really determined to marry her. Edit. Also, to add, I have not had many interactions with her over the course of their relationship. Maybe one other really bad interaction we had was when she dropped out of college. She was just 1.5 years away from graduation. I think her online persona really hit off and she decided to do it full time. I thought it was a really bad idea and told her that she should stay and nagged at her, but I wasn't paying her tuition fees, so I probably shouldn't have said anything. About a week later, OP gave us an update. I wasn't prepared to give an update because I was ready to sit back and just remain cordial, but my daughter decided to tell my husband. For those asking, my husband is a present father but is always away from town, which is why we are more comfortable than the average family in town. Anyway, my husband came back early and he was not happy. I was out when he came back, but he threw my son out. He said that he expected a real change from him before he was allowed back. When I got back, my son had already packed his essentials and left. My husband has to leave tomorrow, but my son is already texting me saying that it was heartless of us and so on. I'm not sure what to do now, but my husband told me to just take care of the house and he will handle this away from town. My daughter was very supportive of my husband and has been screaming at my son whenever he comes knocking. As much as I love how much my family has tried to support me, I feel like my family's torn apart. I never wanted to have my son kicked out, and I never wanted such discord in my family. If there's a positive outcome, I will update again and hopefully soon, but for now, I've prepared a small amount of cash for my son until he can find a way to stand on his own. And I would like to thank all of you lovely people who left such nice comments, but I'm not sure if I could have fully conveyed the nuances of my situation 100% fairly. Many people commented saying that it felt as though the story was missing a lot of context. User sbucks2121 commented, "I suspect that a lot more has occurred that is not being reported. If that is the case, I applaud the father and sister for protecting OP. We preach every day on Reddit that spouses need to stand up for each other, and he did." Additionally, I find it telling that both the sister and father spoke up. It makes me wonder if OP has allowed a lot of disrespect and poor behavior from her son. Based on what is written, OP has not done anything bad. Her own son did not claim the situationship. He took the number for another woman and then blamed it on his mom. He could have shut that down immediately but chose not to mention it. Now he is allowing his partner to verbally attack his mom. That behavior would be shut down immediately in my house and that person would not be welcome. Secondly, OP has a right to be concerned about her son spending lavishly on this person when he still lives at home. She didn't sign up to subsidize the son and his girlfriend's lifestyle. Totally fine if the GF chooses to explore being an influencer, but they shouldn't expect OP's family to pick up the slack financially for it. They need to move out and pay their own way. OP saw the comment and said the following: "Yes, my husband initially was not trying to kick my son out. He wanted to have a talk with him. Coincidentally, his girlfriend was home and apparently she got really angry that my husband barged into the house when they were enjoying a movie. So she left the house and my son started getting angry at my husband, which led to a full-blown fight and him getting kicked out. Also, I am aware that I overly pampered my children. Usually, kids here move out on their own at 21, but since my son was doing exceptionally well academically and he was promising me a lot of opportunities for him, I convinced my husband to bear the financial grunt for him to finish college. We take education opportunities very seriously as both me and my husband were uneducated and we worked day and night for his business to lift off. We just didn't want our son to suffer the same as we did. I guess I was digging my own grave now that I think about it." Unfortunately, that was the final update we ever got from OP. This story reeked of inevitable breakup or divorce if it even gets that far. The girl that OP's son is dating said that she was speaking to other men at the same time before committing to him, all while accepting expensive gifts from him. I hate the word, but this son sounds like a simp. Both the GF and son come across as brats, and OP did state that her son was spoiled during his childhood, which explains a lot. I'm 100% siding with the parents in this situation. Kicking out the son will hopefully wake him up to the real world and knock some sense into him. In an ideal situation, he will realize that he only had it nice because of his parents. Son is a real sack of shit for letting his GF disrespect his dad in his own home. I'm making assumptions, but this sounds like the GF let social media get to her head. I don't think the son even genuinely cares for the girl. We saw him accept the number that OP gave to him, displaying that he was keeping his options open.